This conference will now be recorded.
Hold on, I think I have the wrong. There we go. All right, so welcome to level 1, lesson 3. And as always, everything that we're going to be talking about today is for educational purposes only, and nothing is intended as any type of investment advice. Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to do today. So we're actually not going to use pre-market prints yet, because what happens is that I know a lot of people out there are trading the pre-market, and what they're doing is they're kind of setting themselves up for when the market opens to really kind of almost have to rush. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you exactly, we're going to use the pre-market. This is obviously level 1. Once we get into level 2, we're going to use all the prints that we see in the pre-market. For instance, this would have just been a beautiful number 1 trade off these massive 28 ask prints. You can't ask for anything easier than that. But what I want to do is, by popular demand, what we did last time, I wanted to show you guys how to use the chat once the market is open. So not have to rush into, seeing prints there and having a complete setup, because the pre-market, I want you to understand something. When we see the prints that come in the pre-market, what does that mean? So we, based off when we do our meeting and we set up, expectations for a stock, it's based off of things that we're seeing happening, like I said, during those pre-markets. But how do we interpret that? What are we actually looking for from those prints that we do see in the pre-market? Sometimes we might get confused by this, but what are we actually looking for? And it really doesn't change so definitely intentions to see if it's going to follow the rules. That's definitely part of it. But we forget, just like when we see prints that come in during the regular market, we're actually just looking for a trade out of those. Depending on the amount of prints that we actually get, it's most of the time, it's not an indicator of exactly what the stock is going to be looking to do for the entire day. So for instance, we get those huge 28 ask prints here. Okay, what's the trade? What's the actual trade itself? So it's a number 1 trade. Okay, it's way above print personality. Okay, the stock is trading at 20 cents right now. So really, how much should it have to move based off that many prints? So we can start with 50 cents. That was a lot, though. That was a lot. So starting with 50 cents, you're not going to get hurt at all, but really it should move somewhere in the dollar vicinity, no? Because look at this volume. I want you to understand averages for a second. Okay, does LCID on average typically trade 2.3 million shares during the pre-market? No, right? Okay, so we can expect our average from today, on average $1.26, because 50 cents would be the 100% the correct answer based off of what we have going on right now. You're figuring 2 levels. Okay, that's a perfect price target to kind of set for the beginning. But based off of the variables that we see coming into this, can't we expect it to beat $1.26 in its movement? We can. So that's just something that we need to think about. But once it hits 27, does that mean it's going to have more room down? Does that mean today that we're going to be looking for short trades in LCID all day? And I think sometimes we get caught up thinking like that, because essentially all it has to do is hit a spot, okay, that makes sense for the prints and the increments. And from there, it could come from 27, and guess what? All of a sudden, we just come flying back up. But the 28 prints tell us by far it's what number trade. So we have to, number 1, right? So we have to start to kind of manage once we see prints in the pre-market, what are expectations of that stock? It's still just one trade. It's not that the pre-market is setting up for the entire day. It's setting up for a trade. Because what are we? By definition, we're traders. We're looking for trades in these stocks. So I feel like a lot of people get caught up in what they saw during the pre-market once the market actually opens. And we see constantly, Okay, where we get great prints that come in the pre-market, and all of a sudden it changes its personality once the market opens, because from there we have to take those pre-market prints and kind of fit it into the new story of what we see coming into it at the new point. Is this making sense to everybody? Just want to make sure I'm explaining this right. Because once we have our pre-market trade, once it does what it told us it's going to do in the pre-market, we essentially have to look for a new trade. Like, for instance, if this stock came up and if it comes down to 27.50 and we get a trigger back towards that 28 spot, are those prints still valid for us to trade off of once the market opens? So not really, because think about it. As we said, now, yes, it should pull back a little bit more than 27.50. And we're going to actually work on where we're going to put our orders and what we, want. Basically, it's exactly what I want you guys to do once we get to our level 3. I'm going to do it exactly the way that I want to see it happen. Okay, but I want you to understand something. If this stock now, it hits where it needs to pull back based off those prints, then comes back up to the 28 level, can we still use those 28 prints for a move back to the downside if it's satisfied what it needed to do during the pre-market? No, we can't. It changes everything. Well, yes, to go long, but that's if it's during the pre-market and you're not trading pre-market, then that changes everything. So we have to understand that the prints that we see are during the pre-market aren't magical prints, is really what I'm getting at. It's not like you get good pre-market prints and then that's just, okay, this is what's going to happen for the day. Yeah, you understand what I mean? So what we want to do, we have 5 minutes coming into it. What we're going to be looking for is new prints that are coming in right as the market starts, because we can use that as soon as the market opens. But we're also going to work on using what we see when something pops up in the morning. The morning time is the best, because the second a stock pops up and gives you prints, basically all you have to do is set up your game plan right there. And from there, we take a trade. And the better the longer that you do this, the better you're going to get at basically seeing those prints, instantly understanding what the setup should look like, and then, taking everything that we worked on yesterday. Does it have the possibility of a trade? Okay, because there's also another thing that really gets a lot of people in the morning is a stock that shows tons of potential during the pre-market, but once the market opens, it starts to trade kind of choppy. It doesn't really have the opportunity. It still has great prints in it, but the stock itself isn't giving us the maximum chance to really get into the trade and have it go as far away as quickly as possible for us. And that's what I want to show you guys today. Now, what do we think in LCID based off those prints? Just because we have 5 minutes left and there's no point in just sitting here and waiting for 4 minutes now to pass. What do we think should happen? Should we get a nice bar up as soon as the market opens, or do we need to continue down a bunch? So it's really two ways that the chart should look based off of that many prints coming into 28. Number one, beautiful bar up. From that bar up, what number trade am I going to look for? Number one. Okay, we have to think. Okay, I don't care if this stock runs up to 30 the second the market opens. What did they tell us at 28 based off these 28 ass prints? Look at how many there are. What did they tell us? They need to build. So a bar down, there's two situations. We can have two orders ready to actually be in this stock. Okay, one of them would be where we wouldn't have two orders set. We could have an order set now for when a bar down comes in to actually come down and continue on this path for the building. Or what do they do all the time at the open? They do the reverse of what they're looking to do first, which would then be a bar up, which we would then be ready to take back towards the downside. Because based off of these prints, remember, when I start my day, am I looking to start it with an exception? Never. So what do these prints tell me? It's guaranteed they tell me something right now. It literally should not mean anything else. And if it does, then yeah, they're telling me they need to build. So any type of trade that I'm going to look for to take this trade once the market opens is going to be for building. It's going to be towards building, because in no way is this many prints satisfy, okay, a building phase coming down at 27.57. And there's also another thing we want to look at. Is this building volume right here? Not really. So for this amount of prints to only use this amount of volume, I can't see them being able to build. Because if this is the tip of the iceberg, imagine what they're really looking to do. So then we want to go to our other prints. We want to start looking around, okay? 27.61, okay. When we look at that, where's our money flow so far? Are we getting more selling or more buying? Or is it very close to each other? I'll go slow so you can look at it if you're using my screen. What is the money flow? It's a bit mixed, right? There might be a little bit more towards the buying side, but it's not, you know, just blatantly in your face that they brought this down to buy. So I still go with my same expectations of once the market opens that I'm going to be looking for some type of building trade. Okay, so up here right now, what I'd be doing is I'd be putting an order. Okay, huge 28 ask prints again. So as this is following up right now, I'd have an order about 27.91. Great buying still coming into it. I'm going to be moving my order up. Right now, I'd have an order about 27.97. A little bit higher than that. So 28.18 as we see this thing just popping up. Because yes, there's phenomenal buying in it, but it did not show those 28 aspirants, and then the second time at 28, and then 28.50 right now. So everything that's happening in the stock, what are they telling me they're going to be doing soon? And we'll stick with this one, and then we'll just use a brand new stock afterwards. What are they telling me right now? Build, build, build. So right now, all I'm looking for is a trigger to the downside. Do I want to start to see some selling coming in before that? Absolutely. Why? Because I want to see some people come out there and start taking some short positions in it. 28.50, build, 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 build. Because right now we are getting far away from where we need to be with building, 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 building prints. So let's go back. Any short positions in this stock yet? Has anyone seen any short positions yet? Basically nothing. How do I recognize that? You should see some type of selling coming into it. Look at since 28.50. So right here, if off these 28.50 ask prints, we're going to get a building trade. Okay, that's going to be coming back down. We have to expect that someone's going to be riding this. Look at the prints afterwards. Does anyone see any real selling that's came into it? No, not yet. So even though if a bar down, if we don't see, we should see selling before we get that bar down. Right now, it's all buying. If stock is just all buying, it's going to continue to go up. You understand what I mean? So we need to see some type of selling coming into this. So finally, 25.58. Based off the amount of buying, is this enough? Not really. But we're starting to at least see that selling coming in. So when we have our order ready, if we don't have that selling coming in, remember, if this is going to pull back as much as that it needs to pull back, okay, are people going to ride it to the downside? Are day traders going to get into that to ride it to the downside? Yep, 100%. So we need to see that before we would just take a bar coming towards the downside. Right now, we're 3 minutes in. Remember, we don't have to rush. This one trade in itself can make a day. So there's no rush here. We need to wait to see. Now, where would we have our order right now? Somewhere right around 28.56, right in that area. as the stock is continuing up, but we're anticipating that move that's going to come back towards the downside. And as we can see, we're starting to actually see selling coming into it. 28.80, okay, coming back 28.86. Okay, notice how all of a sudden now all that buying is turning into a bit of selling. So our next trigger that we see, could we go short on this? We could. Can we go short on it before a trigger? No, absolutely not. So we have to be patient. There's no reason to rush things. I know we weren't supposed to, use the pre-market prints, but this is just too good of a trade to look for. What do we know is at 28.50 and 28? Market makers. So what do we want to see around those levels as we're looking? Because otherwise, the stock's not going to be able to break through. So what do we want to see as it's coming to those specific levels? We want to see selling that's going to be able to break it down, right? Okay, now that hinders things, right? But based off of the amount, so we know this needs to pull up now, but based off the amount of prints in comparison to the size of the buying prints, what were these people looking to do at 28.50? How do we interpret these prints? Quicker pull up, right? Still needs to pull up off these, but based off of all the amount of the larger prints that we had, I don't know, there's a lot that's coming in. I don't know if it's going to allow me to go back, but look at the size of the ask prints in comparison to what we just saw coming in there. So now we know it's got to pull up. So now what should we be ready to look for? Our trigger. And this isn't like the stock was just coming up a little bit and then came down. That's a 50-cent move down to those prints at 28.50. So it's not like we were talking about yesterday if the stock just, a few cents above and it just comes down for a second and hits. That's the computer's getting out. This went all the way up and then came back down towards that 28.50 level. Okay, there's a big difference in the psychology behind one of those. One of those was actually getting in versus somebody just hitting that certain level and end up getting out of it. Certainly has the volume pattern. Now, that's not a good look. How would I interpret this 28.62 on the ask side? Extended move up. Now, is it enough based off of the prints that we've seen? No, but it's something to think about. Remember the size of the prints in this stock. So I don't like that because that's not helping because it shows. But remember, is this enough in this type of stock based off the print personality and based off everything that it's shown us to make this stock really affect this stock based off the size of the prints that we saw? And see, you wait all morning and good things happen. Well, not all morning. It's literally 9:37, but good things happen. Who do we know is at 28? Who's the dominant market maker? For a fact. 28, right? So we know that's the dominant market maker. Can we expect games to be played here? Absolutely. So what do we want to see? Especially since we have 28 bid prints that came in. What do we want to see here? It's not just selling though. Because right now you'd be managing your trade. Yeah, if you look over here, Steve, on my 5 minutes, 27.69, there's a print line there. Sometimes it just shows up over here instead of that, work with what I got. Okay, but we're not seeing all the great off-level selling. So what's that tell us? We have to be ready for what? Doesn't mean we have to get out yet, but we have to be ready for what? It can easily give us that pull up. So in a situation like this, should we take some off of our trade? Absolutely. We need to limit some exposure because we could easily just get a bar coming right back up here. Do you see how when we saw those ask prints at 28, see how just because the stock started going up, at no point did I think about going long in this trade? Because who was I following? Who were we following? And as you can see, no off-level selling, we start coming back up. 28 market maker who told us they need to build. So if they're telling me that they need to build, I don't really care what the chart looks like at that point. I'm never going to deviate from what the stock is telling me that it needs to do. Okay, even in this case right here is, we have those 28 bid prints that came back in. Is this enough of a pullback? Is that enough of a pullback? No, not at all. So what I need to do is I need to start looking and I need to start seeing overall some type of off-level prints coming in. If it doesn't have off-level prints and it comes back up to this 28, should I take more of my position off? Absolutely, because it doesn't have those prints. Now, based off those 28 ask prints, could this thing just bar down to 27 right now? It could, but I'm not going to try to get lucky. I'm not going to try to be greedy. And keep in mind, guys, when you're done with this trade, what time is it going to be? Well, I mean, yeah, early. That's a good answer. There's no exact time, but it's going to be very early. So guess what? I don't need to hit a home run. I don't need a home run on a stock like this. So entry would have been right around, remember what I saw, 28.51. 28.56 wouldn't have been a bad, that would have been a better entry, but it would have been right around 20, right around that 28.51. Okay, if you would have been under like at 46, that's fine too. But somewhere around that 28.50, above it or below it, very close to it, and obviously not at the exact level. So it really wasn't before trigger volume. Because as that bar started coming back up, look, okay, is this enough volume? You got to understand something, okay? Look at the volume that it's trading so far today. Is that consistent volume? Absolutely is. Can we trade? Are we going to get beautiful patterns in a stock when it's trading consistent volume in the beginning of the morning? Because if you look, really, I mean, this isn't a trigger either. But look at the amount of volume that it's trading. This is plenty of volume for a trigger to come into it. Most of the time on a stock that's hot in the morning time, you're not going to get great dips and valleys. But when you have consistent volume, you got your price action. Look at the price action bar. You got your price action, and boom. Well, 100%. We were since the stock was moving up the entire day. The entire morning we were looking for, anticipating that trigger to come back down. If you want to talk about dips and valleys, I mean, I guess you could call this a dip, but dips typically don't have, it's trading over 700,000 shares in the beginning of the morning. Do I have to see? This is one of the things. Do I have to worry about follow through coming into a stock like this early in the morning? No, why not? I mean, look at the trading volume that's coming in. Look at time and sales. Does time and sales stop moving? No. But do you see how this, yeah, okay, the stock went up a whole bunch. Could have been a lot more money made on that than the money made on the trigger coming to the downside. But that doesn't matter because we don't think about money. The person told us they need to build, so what do we look for? That's it. We look for a building trade. Did it matter? And this is one of the big things that a lot of people, have a problem with. Did it matter that it took 5 minutes, or I said whatever, how many minutes before, as the market was open, before we took a trade? Nope. Because is this a great start to your day? I'd say so. All right, so now let's go out there and let's look for something else, because we know that this stock eventually it hasn't built enough, so we are gonna look at for a trigger down. But I wanted you guys to see new stuff. I want to keep using the same thing. Let's see, what do we got in the chat? Let's take a look at what we got going on I mean, this would have been another spot to look for a trade, but like I said, I want to bring something up new so we can set up how we would look to trade. It's really nice prints at 2048, but I'm not a fan. All right, let's look at CRTX. All right, so CRTX 1650. First thing we want to look is our print personality. Print personality, as we're looking at it, is about 3, give or take. So if we have 4 prints at 1650, is that a valid trade to look for? Absolutely. Now, what number trade are we going to look for based off the personality of this stock? Number 2. Why not a number 4? Well, it wouldn't be a number 4. Why not a number 3? The 4 would mean going up with ask prints, pulling back, and then going back up. So it's not above print personality. And look at its personality. Does it give long, nice pullbacks to the upside? No. Now, we saw a few prints right here that came in after those. Okay, that's pretty decent. Okay, but is this enough for me to look for this stock to go up first before I'm going to be looking for it to come down? And I'm going to tell you something right now. On a stock like this, it's going to be very hard to identify a trigger. And why is that? This is a little bit more advanced. So it's not that the bars are big. It's not that they're overlapping. What do you notice about almost every single bar? Not consolidated. I mean, those are, there we go, Keith. Same size. I'm going to tell you something. Trying to identify a trigger with price action, is it an easy thing to do when every bar is exactly the same? No, right? So if I'm in the beginning of my morning, it's 9:46 right now. Do I have to trade this? Even though it's got nice prints that tells it needs to go lower? No, absolutely not. Well, not only, Steve, is going to be hard to catch a dollar trigger, but you're not going to know it's a trigger until how long? This is, even though it's a beautiful trend, it's got some selling prints coming into it, this is going to be a very hard stock to trade the correct way. You see what I mean? Because every bar is pretty much exactly the same. So what do? We move on. Let's see what we got. Let's do some scanning. I don't see anything that really jumps out at me on my list so far. HERI looks pretty decent, but this isn't going to be an easy one for you guys to set up because it's in a weird area. And I don't know if it had prints at 3. I can look though. Not nearly enough for me to look for a trade here. This is not a stock I would ever trade. See, you know what? See how, like, especially when you start off your morning with the right trade. Do you see how much calmer things can be now? We don't have to rush for anything that's not perfect. If you lost on your first trade and then you saw Sophie, what mentally are you going to start? Not Sophie. Damn. Talk about not hitting the 2050 and pulling back. Not Sophie. What was I talking about? CRTX. Okay. How enticing is CRTX to look if you're down your first trade? especially when it shows you prints. I mean, it's got a huge range, $4.20. Can make my money back quicker. See, there, DWAC doesn't have shares, Keith. So falling for me, I don't even pay attention to it. Okay, but you're gonna try to, you're gonna try to. Now I have to find something. Okay, right now we don't have to find anything. If that was our morning, that's still a great morning. Oh, okay. All right, so let's see where. I mean, obviously we can have better mornings, but it was still a big trade. Talking about almost $1 in a day. I mean, LCID has been pretty much the best thing that I've seen. Prague is starting to move. So what did this come down to? 2063? Yes, almost $1. I'll take that on a trade any day of the week. So what about Prague now? Well, we got to look at what we had. Can we trade this right now? Could we enter? Nope. Now, if it pulls back below 4, and then we get another one of these, can we? Obviously. Okay, what number trade, even if it was shortable, would we be looking for in this stock? Number 4. Why? Yeah, there's just not enough room to go to the downside. The building has shown us that there's just not enough room. With all the buying from yesterday, I wouldn't be surprised to see this thing run. But guess what? I don't care because I'm going to follow my rules. So right now, it's ahead of us. So I'm going to keep it on my side, and I'm going to continue to scan and try to find something that actually has prints in it. And I'm looking at all my other screens, guys. I don't see much out there. But guess what? When you follow your first trade, it's no big deal because I don't have to rush anything. It's 9:50. I have over an hour left before before anything. Other stocks are going to pop up. Okay. Now, I want you to look at CRTX now. Okay. What would be a perfect case scenario that would actually get me to trade this? What would be a perfect case scenario? Pull up to 1750 and trigger down from there. Okay. Yes, but there's one that's well, now it's kind of almost the same, but there's something different. Now, look at our print personalities. Okay, it's been falling down based off of all 4s and 3s and everything like that. What does this tell me right here? So perfect case would literally be this at 15, but right here, does this need to pull up more than 50 cents? Technically does. Now, if this happens, so at 16, I have to be weary because 16 is a weird number for them to come that hard into. It's just odd. And if you look at the reaction right afterwards, it kind of leaked over. So, I mean, it's not as high percentage as we want it to be. But right now, trading it to the downside, we're a little bit too far past. So in order to trade it to the downside, we need a trade that's going to show us that the stock pulls up from and then triggers back down, which we already know that a trigger is going to be very hard. So really what we'd want to look for is almost a type of build, because is there been any building going in this in this stock besides on its way down? No, so if I see prints that are really, really out of the blue, like way, 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 way over print personality, wouldn't that be what it would need to look like to change its personality? Prague was a nice trade, even though it didn't follow its rules from all the buying that I had yesterday. That would have been a good one. Okay, so this is a situation that I would look for because I can't really trade it to the downside without a big pull up. So in order for me to, the only trade that I could actually look for in this is what? So number 3. I would need to see huge selling into a level and then look, because technically this thing needs to pull up 50 cents higher, but it's just, again, you got the reaction, just not perfect. And if it's not perfect, when you start your day with a good trade, you don't have to trade it. Let's do some more scanning. Looks like I get my chart handled. Okay. JHSI, too cheap for right now. Prague is just on its way. Hood, personality's terrible. Let's go to our other side. Too cheap. Cheap. Nothing there. Can't short it. Nope. 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 Why do I say no on OCGN even though it fits all the criteria? I can't short DWAC, so it's not even worth looking at. Especially when it has a trend like this going right now. Yeah, I can look for, the number 3 trade to come back into it, but it's just too quick. It's the moves are too all over the place. And with a trend and selling like that, because really DWAC, the reason I say no in DWAC, it's because it fits everything. Look at Prague go. Yeah, too small of range. Just to answer my question, OCGN real quick before I get into DWAC. OCGN, if you look, its personality doesn't show anything. It shows doing nothing. So even though it fits all my criteria, this is a stock I could get sitting here watching until 11 o'clock, and I'm not going to get caught into that. Next thing, what was that? Okay, DWAC. Okay, so the reason I don't like DWAC really is because the stock itself, should it have went where it went? It's the same reason I don't call out GameStop, and I don't really like those. It's one of those stocks that it's just anything could happen. And now it's anything could happen with a huge range. So if it was continuously going up and I could trade shares of it to go up, then you know what? Hell yeah. But there's just too much that could happen within this. I mean, one piece of news comes out and then all of a sudden, I go long on it and now it's down $25. It ruins my morning. Now I got to make up $25. It's just a pain in the butt. So it's just not one of those stocks that I really feel comfortable with to a certain extent. When it was happening, that's one thing. But now that it's been it's kind of almost died out a little bit because we have great buying at 105. We have great buying at 110, 115, and all the way up here. But does it ever really have to come back to that? Not really. You should move an LCID. I see nothing going on in the chat. Is it that slow out there for anyone that's scanning? It is. Okay. You can watch GHSI going to 2, but it's really not. I don't see a ton more potential. It looks like we're going to get to enough volume where it ends up being unsustainable. RETO, MNKD, no. Whenever I see, especially like the mostly like really cheap stocks on the rapid risers and rapid gainers, that typically means that there's not a ton that's really moving out there. Let's see, BKTT, anything good there? See, this is one of those stocks, same type of deal. Right now, I can't short it, so what I'd be looking for is something that's just absurdly over print personality on the way down. That would tell me that it needs to pull up a substantial amount. I don't know. See, at this point, I don't know what the prints up here are, so I can't use them. So the only type of trade I'd be able to take is if there was a bunch of bid prints that shows that it needs to pull back up. Let's see, CTX. Nope. You guys see anything, I'll be happy to go over it. Sometimes this is just the way the morning is. Now, something else to think about though, when you have a slow morning like this, because the pre-market started slow, but we got some really good things that started coming in at the end. So when you have a day that starts like this, a lot of times the afternoon you really start to see some really good trades. So just something to kind of keep in mind when you're thinking about what time it's for it to go to lunch. A lot of times they almost towards 11 o'clock is when you really start to see things out there moving. I'm just looking for any type of controlling prints out there. Let's see. Let's go down this list. I'll tell you something though. When you start your day, and I say this in the chat in the morning meeting almost every day, but when you start your day with a great first trade, everything just gets easier. You get calmer. There's no reason to rush anything. What happens is if you haven't made a trade yet and there hasn't been anything really out there to really be able to trade, then you start trying to make things up with your head. You start, seeing a stock that probably isn't tradable, but you're going to try to find that trade in it anyway. Let's see what we get at 150. Okay, some really nice aspirants at 150. We could look at this. So in a stock like this, we got great volume that's starting to come in, beautiful prints at 150. What kind of pullback would I be looking for in this stock based off these prints? How would I set up my game plan in this cheap of a stock right now? Beautiful prints at 150. See what happened after. Not much after, but yep, 10 cents. Why 10 cents? Oh, it's trading in 5-cent increments. And when we look at the actual 150 prints, okay, it's definitely a bunch over print personality. So I'd look for the stock to come down to 140. Okay, where would I put my my entry? So 146, how much could I expect to make in a stock with these prints in this stock? Remember, if it's going to pull back, basically 20 cents. And when I say 20 cents, I mean it should move 20 cents from 140 to 160 based off there. So really only needs to move to about 160 off of those prints. So from that, my entry would have to be what? If I'm looking to make 20 cents, what would my entry have to be? Well, not 139 because, yeah, basically 141 or 142. And then where would my stop be? So unless you're going to trade, no, my stop, not my price target. I couldn't even go that far. Think about that. Well, yes, you could. Yeah, but really would be like 139. Okay, so unless I'm trading lots and lots and huge amounts of shares, is this stock worth looking at? No. But if you are trading lots and lots and lots of shares, 20 cents, makes a big deal sometimes. Oh, man. I don't see a thing. Means besides Prague, but it doesn't have the rules yet. I mean, this thing has the ability to get to 5 based off the amount of buying that we've seen into it, but that's nice, 430. But this is one of those types of trades that would be based off of more of a story, and it's not really following rules. It's one of those cheaper stocks. It's a different animal, so I don't really want to talk about that. Yeah, slowest morning that I've seen in a couple of weeks. There's just not much that's going on out there. Here's your 160. This could get interesting. Let's take a look at what happens at 350. Nothing. And halted. Will eventually halt it. Hmm. I don't see anything new popping up at all. And that's fine. It's just patience. Market maker planned the push up to the hole, right? Well, market maker probably, definitely did it because that was a lot of volume coming into it. Do you guys remember the percentage I told you of how much of the time you're actually trading versus looking or watching? Yeah. Today it seems like it's gonna be about 90. I just see nothing new popping up on these scanners. I mean, there's just nothing. I don't see any. No one has put a thing in the chat, so that means that the day is definitely real slow. But it's nice when you start your morning off okay. That's really, I mean, obviously the trade itself, but that's really our lesson for today is that, your first trade of the day is very important. You set yourself up right. The rest of the day becomes a lot easier. It's also a lot easier when you ever notice, I mean, it's just, obviously, but you ever notice when you're up $1, it's a lot easier to sit there and watch for that day versus when you're down? It's way easier to sit at your computer and just watch things. I mean, the same thing's popping up. Stocks, I'm pretty sure, is an ETF. Or, yeah, it's whatever, not an ETF, but same type of deal. That's never a good thing. Prague looks like it wants to explode. Really don't have much else to say. CRTX is still in this consolidation thing. There's just, even though it's got great prints at 16, there's just no real trade to be able to take here. Ready for a party? Chart would have been decent, but the volume is just not even close to acceptable. Tesla? No. I mean, yeah, it's moving, but I mean, even for Tesla, look, I mean, for $1,000 stock, that's not even that much. Look at its volume. FRM moving nicely. Okay, well, this isn't terrible. I mean, it's got some range, so it's definitely something we could look at, but its print personality is terrible. We just would need prints in it. So we'll keep that up. I'll scan on the other screen. I mean, it is a rare thing for us to go, especially after pretty much 20 minutes of the open to go and not be able to find anything that's really moving yet. So I'm definitely expecting things to pick up later, and probably as soon as we finish our class, which isn't a terrible thing for me, but I really would like to give you guys another example. There's just, I don't know, there's just nothing there. I mean, LCID needs to continue down. It's got those bids. We had market maker at 28 told us that it really needs to go. I mean, see, AFRM, it's moving nicely, but look, every single, I mean, it's not getting anything. There's nobody to follow here. So until there is somebody to follow, remember, movement does not warrant a trade. It happens, guys. Sometimes it gets slow, and we just click over and over again until we find something that actually gives us the ability to be able to trade it. It's a very, it's if even understanding how to trade, as important as that is, it's important to understand that sometimes there's just nothing there to do. Prague off 4, still. No. So far, I got nothing. I mean, by far, from what I could see, LICD was the trade to take, the stock to watch. DWAC at 55. Remember we just talked about, Amy? I'll look at it, but what happened at 55? Anything good? Nope. Even the stocks with good volume around levels aren't giving controlling prints right now. AMD was also another one. Yeah, sure looks like it. Where were the ask prints, the top ask prints? That'd even be a nice trade to take back to the upside. 120. Oh, all the way up 120. Oh, so it's beautiful. Trigger right here. Off to the races. Every level. Okay. So I mean, it's all depending on what your account size would have been. AMD for someone that's has a little bit more would have been a way better one, but LCID it's $28. That's affordable for everybody. But this looks like it was beautiful. It looks like it's coming back on its way up right now. Again, though, just not printing on the way up. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to call it because I don't really, to sit here and just listen. So I'm going to continue to scan and try to find anything, and then I will put it in the chat. This is a problem I have often. LC was a good example. Going back to LIC at 9:37 a.m., I often late to the entry looking for that absolute trigger was my percent, 9:38, which was my, after my, so Tracy, but see, the thing is that you have to, that's why I'm teaching it the way that I am. Okay, I literally said where to have the order put for there. Now this bar, what is the absolute trigger? Because if you waited for the absolute trigger, even if you got in at 28.28 at the bottom of this trigger, you still had another bar that went from 28.33 to 27.67. So I mean, you're still talking about 66 cents that's there. So you're not anticipating it, and if you're not, so put your orders lower then. So if it's at 28.51, you're going to have to put your orders lower, and from there, then you're going to be see, the problem with it is what's going to happen is you're going to get worse entries, but you're also going to get more confirmation, and you're going to miss less trades coming in. So I mean, it was. If you go back to the recording, I would definitely, as I was talking, look, I mean, it was pretty damn clear the way that it barred and then came right to that level, hit. I mean, it would have been an order and then off to the races. So I'm not sure what you mean by an absolute trigger. It's volume and price action. So if you look over here, these bars, pretty much once it got right here, okay, that's what we'll call 28.49. It was the same. It was a price action bar. Okay, so the volume and price action at 9:38. That's the bar that would have continued. Your trigger's here. See how this bar is bigger than all the other ones over here? This is our price action bar at 9:37. 9:38 to take that trade. I mean, that's we should have already been in the trade. That would have been a secondary trigger that was coming into it. Do you see what I mean? Our trigger's here. The price action, but that's exactly what we said. Okay, right here, that volume is over 600,000 shares. Do you see what I mean? 600,000 shares, is that enough Is that volume? Remember, not every trade's going to come out of a volume or a dip. If you have consistent volume, what's the only thing you need now for it to be a trigger? And especially in the beginning of the market, are you really going to get volumes of like real dips and uh, real valleys when the stock is trading on average, like, at this point, let's call it its average somewhere in the vicinity of, I don't know, 800,000 shares? You see what I mean? So it's a lot more important when the stock starts to come down. When the stock is just trading constantly. Remember, okay, time and sales even now isn't stopping. It doesn't stop moving. So volume waning. What's the problem with volume waning? What does volume waning mean? I see more of a problem with waxing volume than I do with waning volume. Think about that for a second. What does waxing volume tell us is going to happen? Unsustainable bar. What does waning volume tell us is going to happen? I don't know. You guys have this notion in your head about waxing volume. Yeah, that means we're going to get a volume spike. You know what I'm saying? You're going to get that. You're going to start to get consistent volume. Now, is LCID based, and I want you to understand the theory behind this. Okay, in LCID, was this stock going to stop trading today? Or let's say before 10 o'clock, was it going to stop trading based off of all the variables that we had in it? Impossible, right? So yeah, the volume was waning, but remember, I wasn't even paying attention to the volume bars themselves because of the fact that the volume was so high. Okay, a trigger isn't volume coming out of a dip or a valley plus price action, right? A trigger is what? High volume and price action. Because if we would have got a huge bar right here, more than likely it would have ended up coming right back up, just like we saw. So this right here, waning, I don't know why you guys talk about waxing volume. I don't know who taught you this, but waxing volume to me means a stock is coming to a pullback or coming to an end. Waning volume means if a stock is not going to stop trading, we got room to go. Because when the volume and the price action actually comes in, the following bar should end up being bigger. You see what I mean? But don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean waxing volume to a certain extent, is especially like when it's waxing up to a level or something like that. But you don't need waxing volume to make a trade. And like I said, waxing volume in my head eventually means that I'm going to get a big pullback. I'm going to have to start taking off my shares because of the fact that waxing volume, can it last? I want to we'll pull up a few stocks and I want you to just look at something. Okay, this is a terrible example because it's terrible stock. Terrible stock. Okay, we'll pull up like AMD. Okay, what do you notice about AMD in the beginning of the morning? Volume starts to wax because the first bar of the opening morning should be the biggest. So I assume wane. So you're going to see waning volume coming into the opening of the market quite often. Let's pull up another one. Plug. What do we notice? Beginning of the morning, it's going to start to wane. It has to, because otherwise, if it just started to wax, then it's going to end up coming and making a kind of a crash down with a lack of volume. You're going to see that almost with any real stock that's moving. You're going to see it start off real high and then end up coming down. So really, what it comes down to is the volume. Is it enough volume? And in this case, when we go back to LCID, in no way whatsoever did it ever get to a point where it was not. You're talking about, again, 550,000 shares of volume. 550,000 shares. If a stock started with 550,000 shares and went down to 200, is that still a stock we could trade? I want you to think about it that way. It might help you kind of understand it a little bit more. If a stock started with 500 and went down to only trading 200,000, would absolutely. So if a stock went down to 500,000, is that really a big deal? Or do we still have a lot of interest in that stock? You see what I mean? There's still a ton that's still sitting there. So in the beginning of the market, your volume patterns aren't going to be as important. In the first, let's say 20 minutes, aren't going to be as important as they're going to be later on in the day, because you're just going to have consistent volume being traded. You see what I mean? All right, perfect. All right, guys. So yeah, slow, but it only takes one. It takes one trade to make a good day. And you know what? It happened early, but I'm sure there's going to be more stuff. So I'll talk to everybody in the chat, and happy trading.